Most leftists suck at communicating. And the solution isn't pointing out logical fallacies, burying people in statistics, or any of the other cheap tricks that debate bros peddle online. The truth is, if you want to win people over, you need a complete shift in your mindset. Hi, my name is Harper. I help new leftists get educated and organized. I debated competitively and studied rhetoric for 4 years, and then used what I learned to build an audience of over 100,000 followers. In other words, I know what I'm talking about when it comes to persuasion. So, because I want to help you avoid looking like a goofball, I thought we'd break down this lovely conversation, and I'll offer some do's and don'ts when it comes to crafting messages that actually resonate with people. Let's go.
Giving people government aid makes them lazy.
The way it makes people lazy is not necessarily because they're bad people. It's because you have fiscal cliffs. You get this amount of welfare if you make under $24,000 a year. You make $25,000 a year, your benefits drop off. So it actually disincentivizes people from moving up, working harder, taking on more jobs. And it's a terrible structure.
I completely agree with that from a perspective of it creates animosity. If there was a system saying that you couldn't use a certain government aid program that you're already paying taxes to just because you make this amount, wouldn't you have animosity for those people below you?
There are cases where I think people are incentivized to work less hard in order to keep their income under a certain level so they can collect a certain amount of government money, which in that specific case, then yes, I guess it does incentivize laziness. But also, if you look at government programs like Medicare and Medicaid, they're some of the most highly approved of programs in the country. And when you make a welfare program universal, when you make it so it applies to everybody, it basically becomes politically invincible because nobody is going to argue for their grandma's health care to be taken away. And we have a problem in this country where 45,000 people are dying every single year because they don't have access to basic health insurance. And I think if we were to nip that in the bud and nationalize those giant pharmaceutical companies and make sure that healthcare is provided to everyone, we would actually stimulate a lot of innovation, a lot of labor, and a lot of hard work in this country because people would be less bogged down by medical bills and would be more healthy in general.
Okay, this is important. Here's a trap that has destroyed the left for decades. If you want to galvanize people, if you want to help build a movement that people are actually willing to fight for, you have to realize one thing. You don't get any points for playing small. I say this from personal experience. I used to be a full-on young conservative in high school. My favorite way to decompress after a long day at school was riding my bike around the neighborhood, listening to Ben Shapiro. Not kidding. So what changed? I didn't shift my perspective because of some spineless Democrat announcing a $2,000 earned income tax credit for small business owners starting a business in a majority minority. No, it was Bernie saying free healthcare, period. Because even though I had been trained to hate everything he stood for at the time, I kind of had to hand it to him. He was inspiring. I could sense that he had some measure of vision. And that vision allowed him to challenge the status quo. So his ideas never left my mind. And over time, that seed grew. I started to think, maybe a better world is possible. And all of a sudden, I began to realize that the conservative pundits I loved so much existed solely to convince me that the status quo was unquestionable and to keep ordinary people divided. So what's the point to my story? The point is, people are more attracted to bold vision than they are to smart policy. If you're anti-capitalist, that means that you want to fundamentally transform society. And you gotta own that. Because guess what? Most people are fed up with business as usual. They're desperate for an alternative. Why am I so confident about that? One word, Trump. In 2016, he said, we're gonna build a wall and Mexico is gonna pay for it. And he won on that. In 2024, he said, we're gonna send the military door to door to round up illegals and deport millions of people. And he won on that. And sure, some of that appeal is pure bigotry. I get that. But I think a lot of it was just people want big change. So Eddie does a good job of sidestepping all that sort of like small ball policy wonkery and just asserting straight up, we don't want to rearrange deck chairs in the Titanic. We want to change the game entirely. And yes, that's polarizing. If you want people to love you, you got to be okay with people hating you too. The good news is, I truly believe that our proposals would benefit the mass of people. Our entire goal is to advocate for the interests of the working class, which is like 99% of the population. So as long as you communicate your message well, then theoretically, for every hater, we should get way, way more diehard supporters. If you want another example of why these galvanizing statements are so important, you can check out JFK's famous speech where he's basically announcing the Apollo program.
We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard. Because that goal will serve to organize and measure the best of our energies and skills.
This right here is why this speech is famous. He said, we choose to go to the moon, not because it is easy, but because it is hard. So what's he doing here? He acknowledges that this is going to be difficult, that it's never been done before, but he has purpose. He has a bold vision. And in communicating that purpose, he laid down the gauntlet and he gave the American people something to strive for. People want something to strive for. They want a big project. They want their life to mean something. Earned income tax credit on small, but that's not meaningful. Alleviating poverty is meaningful. Making sure that every child can grow up and have access to a decent education, that is meaningful. Making sure that everybody has housing. Making homelessness a thing of the past, that is meaningful. Stopping climate change, that's meaningful. This is what defines our generation. People will sign on to that, I promise you. They will be massively attracted to something real. So don't sell out your ambition for the purpose of like trying to seem respectable, because people will never respect you for that. I'm not saying that being radical is good for its own sake. Then you're just like an edgelord. What I am saying is we are in a time when many people are beginning to realize that the status quo is not working. And so we would be a fool to not present an alternative to that status quo. So stand on business. It's gonna get you flack at first, but I promise it's the only way for us to build mass appeal.
When China was pure communistic, 45 million people starved to death eating bark and dirt and leaves. And it's hard to know, is it doing better, all the things you like? Are you sure that's from the communist side, the Mao Zedong side?
I would argue
or is that from the capitalist side?
I would argue it's definitely the free market side.
Yeah.
I also just want to push back on one thing real fast.
Are we still going to stick with the China thing? Because
Well, I just wanna
there's
say
so many
it's-
great points
Yeah.
here.
We need a
that, like, we need
prompter over
to
here.
I know.
focus. You know what I mean?
This is a tricky spot. If you don't know how to handle the tendency that people have to pivot from topic to topic, your conversations will go nowhere. So how should you approach these situations? First of all, you have to understand why people do this in the first place. So usually people change the subject when they're uncomfortable because their beliefs are being challenged. So they try to redirect the conversation to a topic that they're more confident on. Most of the time, this is subconscious. Our brains are hardwired to move away from pain. And since for most of us, our identity is wrapped up in what we believe, questioning our beliefs is painful in the same way that losing a part of your body is painful. Again, I'm speaking from experience. I've felt this pain firsthand. Like I said earlier, I grew up conservative. So when I started thinking about left-wing ideas, I went through a stretch of time where I didn't know what I believed. That was painful. I remember just sitting in the living room one late winter afternoon, just feeling lost, almost with a headache, because I couldn't make sense of the world. So when someone moves the goalpost in conversation, you have to realize more often than not, they're just running away from pain. So now that you understand this dynamic, how do you harness it to become more persuasive? There are two pitfalls here, both of which you need to avoid in order to successfully communicate. I'm gonna give you an analogy from one of my favorite books, Dune. So in the world of Dune, everyone has like energy shields. So you can't just stab them or like use bullets. So the way that people fight in this world has to be very elegant, because the only way to actually score a blow on your enemy is for your knife to move slow enough that the shield doesn't immediately bounce it back. This is exactly what you will experience in conversation. Imagine that like the shield is their ego, okay? On one hand, you can just let them change the topic whenever they want to, in which case your conversation is gonna go nowhere. You're never gonna reach anybody that way. This is the equivalent of like in the Dune world, if you were to like go too slow and miss, because anytime they start to question their beliefs, they'll resolve the tension by just like pivoting away to another topic. On the other hand, if you push them too hard or call them out or overtly try to control the conversation, they'll see you as an opponent and shut down. At this point, no matter how well you argue, you're not gonna get through to them because you've tripped their ego. That's like the Dune equivalent of like hitting them too hard and their shield activates and your knife bounces off. So how do we navigate between these two extremes? It's a delicate process. But in my opinion, the best way to bring people back to the original topic is with questions. Okay, we can talk about immigration if you want, but one more thing on that last point. Just help me understand. What do you think? Sort of like that. Let's be honest. Most of the people you encounter are going to get their talking points from MSNBC or Fox or Joe Rogan or whatever. Asking people questions is a great non-combative way to get them to realize they don't know as much as they thought they did on a given topic. And at that point, you've essentially plowed the soil. You can gently plant the seed of a new idea, not as a superior, not as someone handing down the truth from on high, just sharing your perspective. I'm telling you, if you come into this with an inauthentic, manipulative mindset, people are going to see that, they're going to resent you for it, and they're going to be right to. By the way, if you're not aware, this is a sequel to my first video covering the same topic. So if you haven't seen that yet, definitely go check it out after this video.
It's crazy to me to hear somebody say China's safer, though, and like you can literally be disappeared from the streets. Like even your celebrities, famous tennis players, famous
FBI.
people, they are.
Shout out Julian Assange.
Yeah, I mean, shout out Julian Assange, but we are not incarcerating Julian Assange right now. We are trying to extradite him here for trial, which I'm opposed to.
We're doing our best, and he's been sitting in Belmarsh.
And I've spoken out with him. I actually work with his brother on the campaign to get him freed. But what I'm saying is, we don't have political prisoners in the U.S. We don't. Who are they? Who are they?
We assassinate them. Yeah,
No,
sure.
Who have we assassinated?
Jaleel Montekim
Fred Hampton
was in jail for
We
7
did that.
years.
The
He
government
was a
did that.
Black
I'm fine with this. I detest the FBI. I detest most policing agencies. I've done a ton of work on criminal justice reform.
If you can find a moment of agreement like this, great. As a matter of fact, if you agree with your conversation partner on anything, it actually is well worth it to go out of your way to point that out. Why? Because it establishes social capital. Think about the conversation as a bank account. When you push back against what they're saying, that's like making a withdrawal of social capital. The problem is too many people come in thinking that if they just demolish the other person's point of view, then the other person will be forced to admit that they got owned and change their opinion on the spot. But in reality, like you and I both know, this is not how human interactions work. As a matter of fact, like just destroying somebody can actually reinforce their beliefs. So if we think back to the bank analogy, we understand why. Hammering on your disagreements is like making a bunch of withdrawals without depositing anything. Of course, you have to spend social capital to advance your point of view. But if you're trying to spend what you don't have, you are in debt, my friend. So let's apply this principle to the clip we just watched. Hannah likes capitalism, but she's willing to admit that domestic repression and military interventionism are undesirable. So your task in this situation is to build social capital by establishing that you both agree, and then spend that social capital by explaining how suppression of dissidents at home and imperialism abroad is a natural consequence of a capitalist system, because it is absolutely in the interest of the capitalist class to do those things. Again, we're just trying to gently introduce a new perspective in a way that doesn't threaten them. And if they understand your perspective and you presented it in a reasonable manner, it's like you've given them this lens that they can carry around. That's your worldview. And they're going to prefer their lens, their worldview, because they're used to it. But over the course of months or maybe even years, if you've left a good impression, they're going to get curious and start to peek through yours. And if the image they see through that lens is much more crisp and full and powerful, they may begin to prefer it. So you need to present your position in a reasonable way, but that's only part of the story. Having a conversation is actually the last step in the persuasion process. Let me explain. Marshall McLuhan, who sort of pioneered the philosophical study of media theory, coined this phrase: the medium is the message. Basically, this means that what is being communicated is inseparable from how it's being communicated. So think about this. In your personal interactions, what is the medium for your message? The medium is you. Love it or hate it, people are intuitive. They say not to judge a book by its cover, but we all do, every day. It's how we process unlimited information in limited time. Our brain uses shortcuts, which means people are way more likely to perceive your position as reasonable if you present yourself in a reasonable way. Now, this doesn't mean that you have to go get a crew cut like me or wear a suit everywhere. Don't be a weirdo. Be authentic to your own style. But however you choose to present yourself, Just think, how could I put 10% more effort into this? For example, everybody in this Jubilee video has clearly taken the time to make sure that they're showing up as their best self, even though they all have very distinct vibes. So it's not just about the clothes you wear or the poses you strike. You need to live an upright life because you are an example for the people around you. We are asking people to fundamentally transform society. That's a big ask. Why would anyone sign on to that if we don't inspire confidence in the people? I think that it honestly makes people on the left uncomfortable to talk like this. So I want to dispel that taboo. I want this channel to be a place for leftists who are trying to learn, who are trying to grow, who want to hold themselves to a higher standard. By the way, if you're a new leftist and you want to get more educated, I'll leave a resource for you in the description. I've whipped up a super simple reading guide just to help you get started with your learning. All the books are super fascinating, super readable. I just want this to be a good foundation, and from there you can delve into some of the more classic, dense works. Like I said, link in the description. All right, back to the video.
The purpose of an economy should be to maximize the well-being of the population.
Hey, that was my problem.
No disagreements. What happens if no one disagrees?
I knew we'd agree on
There's
this.
no debate.
It's kind of self-explanatory at this point. The government should always, or in general, the society should strive to be better and to make lives better for everyone.
But I would say not the government. I think you need smaller. Government seems to mess everything up.
Is that a yes or no with you, Ty?
Humans, if you talk about the flourishing, you can still see there's tribes that live more hunter-gatherers. Small, I think smaller's better.
What about a robot? What
Yeah,
about
but no,
an
but
unbiased
family's
robot?
better.
There's an anime called Psycho-Pass.
Yeah,
Which, okay,
great
you
show.
guys don't know?
Hell
Okay,
yeah.
perfect. So I think a centralized brain computer with multiple, like, millions and millions of minds in it might be more efficient. So a bigger government might be more efficient. If we could actually pull it off like Psycho-Pass, I think it would work.
I would not be talking like this. You're just rolling the dice. Keep it tangible, keep it relatable. This video is going out to millions of people, so obviously it's a little harder, but you gotta know your audience. If people don't understand the reference, you're gonna come across as a wacko. Just remember, from the perspective of an average person, what we believe is already pretty out there. So your job is to make these ideas more tangible, more accessible, not less. I haven't seen this show. Maybe it's a perfect analogy, but just from face value, it seems whack. I recommend you avoid stuff like this. So that's it for now. Let me know if you like these breakdowns. I'm very happy to keep making them. And if you have something that you want me to break down, please send it my way. Until next time, a better world is possible.